In this week's Connect to Congress segment, I'm joined by Representative Pramila Jayapal. She represents Washington's 7th Congressional District, which includes most of Seattle and the surrounding areas. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me.
It's always great to be with you.
We're always happy to have you. Talk a little bit about the continuing resolution. What is that looking like as we go into the rest of October and into November?
Well, as you know, the Republicans were unable to pass the actual appropriations bills that we need to fund government, and so we needed to pass a continuing resolution. We did get that done before we left. That takes us to December 20th. So that means that before December 20th, after the election, when we go back, we need to fund the government with actual appropriations bills. I am confident we're going to get that done, but it will require Republicans, once again, to not play around with these things. I mean, obviously, we need more money for disaster relief, but we also need all the money that funds government services across the country. You know, making sure that TSA is working and that the planes can land safely and leave safely, making sure that we're getting Social Security and Medicare funded so that people can get their checks. All of that is funded through the government, and that's why it's so critical that we need clean appropriations bills that stick to the limits that Republicans agreed to for both defense spending and non-defense discretionary spending.
And you mentioned disaster relief. We have Hurricane Helene that has just passed through, and also now Hurricane Milton on the horizon. Is more money needed for those efforts? What's the federal government doing to help?
Absolutely. We need more money because these disasters have increased across the country in all of our states, and even places that we thought were safe. They were called climate havens, like Asheville, North Carolina. Helene showed us that nothing is safe. I mean, there was a new report published that showed that the rising sea level temperatures are actually helping conditions for even more extreme disasters, increasing it by 400 to 500% because of climate change. You know, what we've seen is across the board, we have climate change emergencies increasing both in geography and in scale. And my heart just goes out to the people of Florida, of Georgia, of North Carolina, who are just struggling, and now again in Florida with Milton coming, another hurricane. And I think this is just, we have to tackle climate change, and we need more money so that people can not just rebuild, but actually think about how to be in areas that can be climate resilient. Because I think the tendency is to want to quickly rebuild, but we also need to look at how do we rebuild safely so that people don't have to keep losing their homes.
Let's bring it back locally now to the money you were able to secure for your own district, District 7, $19 million in funding. Where is that money going to?
We're so excited. We did a big checks event yesterday where we present big checks to everybody, and we found it such a great way because people get to hear about what other people are doing. And people have just told us how much they appreciate it. So most of the money is split between housing. We have a lot of affordable housing that we're funding through these projects, including some renovations of units that are otherwise not going to be able to be utilized. So it's both new housing and renovation. We funded food banks, 2 food banks, because food access is still a massive problem, and these food banks are really overwhelmed with demand. We also funded some really interesting innovation, research, development, and workforce projects at the University of Washington and at Northeastern University. These are labs to help with keeping us at the forefront of innovation and also to train up our workforce. And public safety. We funded the City of Seattle's care response because so many of the calls that come through 911 do not require police. And so this is really funding their approach to relieving police officers from having to respond to all these things and making sure that we have support service professionals that can respond.
All right, less than 1 month until the presidential election. How are Democrats feeling as we get closer to that day?
You know, we're doing everything we can. This is going to be a very tight election. I don't want to, soft pedal this. It's going to be very tight, and it does come down to just a few states because of what I believe is a pretty archaic electoral college system where not all votes count the same. So we're down to a certain number of states. I feel positive about it. The momentum is amazing. The volunteers, the money from first-time donors, the new registrations from young people. I was just in Georgia last week. We had a fabulous Canvas kickoff with over 100 people going out on doors. I'm going to Michigan this weekend. I'll be in North Carolina and maybe Pennsylvania next weekend, and then Wisconsin and again Michigan the week after. So I'm traveling a lot. I feel a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. We're also doing 2 phone banks, Mondays and Wednesdays, into states across the country, but you can be anywhere and call from your house. Those have already generated over 20,000 phone calls just in the last 2 weeks. So a lot of energy. Are we going to be able to carry it through? The polls are tight and they're all within the margin of error. That's why they're called swing states. So we're not leaving anything on the table. I feel good that we're going to take back the White House. I feel good that we're going to make Hakeem Jeffries the next Speaker of the House, and Democrats will have the House back, which of course is going to be critically important.
Once the election is over, Congress back in session, what are your key legislative priorities?
Well, we have to get this appropriations bill done. I also hope that we can get the farm bill done. Though I don't know whether that's going to happen. And then we're really preparing for the next session, assuming that we have Democratic control again. The Progressive Caucus has already put out our day one agenda, and of course that includes codifying abortion rights, it includes getting money out of politics, it includes codifying voting rights, and then some of the key economic issues that we've talked about before, like childcare, making sure that we can actually help families with the cost of childcare, making sure that we are investing in housing. And the Vice President just released a really exciting proposal about covering long-term care as a Medicare benefit. That is huge. So many families are dealing with taking care of loved ones and not being able to give them home and community-based care, or literally going broke because they can't afford to put them in a nursing home or to take care of them at home with private care. So this is a really important benefit that the Vice President has talked about, and I hope we can get that done quickly.
Yeah, childcare also been such a priority of yours, as we talked about in the past.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's turn now to the Middle East and the conflict there. What do you think needs to be done? What is the federal government's role in that conflict?
Well, I think that, we have been striving for peace for both Israelis and Palestinians. And we know this has become an increasingly volatile situation, both because of a lot of things that were happening before October 7th, and then, of course, that horrific terrorist attack by Hamas on October 7th. And now, in the year past, the response from Israel, which unfortunately from the Israeli government has been to really target a lot of innocent civilians. And in my view, the Israeli forces have violated our domestic Leahy laws, which require our money to go to forces that are complying with humanitarian laws and principles. So I believe that the only way to get Israel to the table, to get Benjamin Netanyahu to the table, is to say that we are going to apply our domestic laws, and that it is time to stop funding certain offensive weapons that the United States is providing to Israel, unless Israel comes to the table. And of course, Hamas has to come to the table for a ceasefire deal, because this has escalated into a regional crisis. The United States' role right now should be to use every tool in our toolbox to reduce the tension and to come up with a diplomatic solution, because now we're seeing innocent civilians in Lebanon be killed. We're seeing attacks on Israel. Obviously, thousands of Israelis on the northern border are now having to evacuate. So this is not good, even if you just looked at it from the perspective of Israel's safety and security. Escalating tensions is a terrible thing for every party involved: Israel, Palestinians, as well as the Lebanese, as well as Iranians. So that's what I think we need to do.
And as we've been reporting, a UW student was killed there. You've called for an independent investigation as well as others. Why has that not happened yet?
It's been frustrating. I have been in close touch with both the family. Aisenura's father is a constituent of mine, her husband, and she lived very close to the district and were in the district for a long period of time. So I've been in close touch with them. I've also been in very close touch with the State Department. I've had multiple classified and unclassified briefings. I just had one. It is extremely frustrating that the U.S. government has not taken the killing of a U.S. citizen who was peacefully protesting and observing what was happening seriously. And I think what we need is to do our own investigation rather than wait for the IDF's investigation. Now, the IDF has already said that she was killed by mistake. Eyewitness accounts say it was not by mistake. It was a sniper who shot her in the head when there was no protest or anything. But the whole idea of rules of engagement of the military, why are they using live bullets for peaceful protests? This makes no sense at all. And so the US government has been starting the discussion about changing the IDF's rules of engagement in these situations, but we have not seen any accountability. We can't wait for the IDF to do an investigation because that may take a very long time. I think it is appropriate in these circumstances where even the Secretary Blinken has said that this killing was unprovoked, that we should do our own investigation immediately, given that there are so many eyewitness accounts, including published in the Washington Post, that this was not just an accidental shooting. And my heart goes out to her family who have not gotten answers yet. And I'm pushing very hard. Senator Murray and I wrote a letter shortly after this happened. Adam Smith has also led a letter with 102 members of Congress signing on, calling for an independent investigation. We need to keep up the pressure. And frankly, I'm quite appalled, as I said in my statement, that we have not moved further in getting accountability for US citizens and keeping them safe and requiring our funding to not be used in, if the IDF refuses to change its rules of engagement.
Do you think you'll be able to hopefully get somewhere with this?
I sure hope so. I certainly have been vocal, and I did release a statement yesterday expressing my disappointment that I cannot even say to my constituent and her family that that we are taking this seriously. And I should say that this is not, and Senator Murray and I pointed this out in our letter, this is not the first time. Of course, we go back to Rachel Corrie's killing, and there have been multiple killings just this year in the West Bank, and of course the incredible journalist who was shot and killed. So multiple instances of US citizens being killed. And I think what is particularly horrifying in these circumstances, every killing is of a US citizen anywhere in the world is terrible. In this circumstance, people feel like it's our money. We are the largest backer of military aid to Israel. And it is our money, our weapons, our bombs, our bullets that are being used to kill innocent civilians, including US citizens.
Besides the election, what is your biggest focus, main priority as we wrap up 2024?
I think it's tough to think about anything besides the election, just a couple weeks before the election. But I have been very focused on thinking about the different scenarios and how we can get across the line some of these things that every American family, you and I have talked about this on childcare. This is not an issue for just people who are the most vulnerable and lowest on the scale. This is an issue for people who have jobs, who are working, who consider themselves middle-class families. This is an issue for everyone. And there is no reason why the United States should be left out of all the other peer countries in terms of being able to provide this. I'm also looking at healthcare. There are a lot of new reports about the horrors of the American healthcare system and how we spend the most, but we get the worst outcomes for our healthcare. And it's because we have a privatized system with private insurance companies where you lose your health care if you lose your job because so much of it is employer sponsored. Or you can't actually cover the health care that you need even if you have private insurance because the copays, the deductibles, the out-of-pocket costs are so great. So I've been thinking a lot about these big problems that face Americans and make people feel unnerved, make people feel economically fragile, and that also then gets turned into hate and discrimination against the wrong people. So, as an immigrant myself, I'm always thinking about immigration and how unfortunately hate against immigrants is being used to just make terrible things acceptable to people. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about how do we start to focus again on giving people the security, economic security that they need, so that they are not privy or prey to people who are trying to use ways to divide us. We have so much more in common than we do differences, and we should be celebrating our differences, not attacking people because they are different.
Representative Pramila Jayapal, thank you so much for joining us for this week's Connect to Congress.